Hi everybody, it's Armin. Today we're going to be installing a turbo kit along with a lot of other stuff on this customer's red NC back here. About 7 or 8 years ago I installed a 2.5 liter into this car along with some other minor upgrades, and the customer decided that it's time to go ahead and add big power. So here we are. Let's go over all the parts we have sitting here. We have a Fab 9 turbo kit, part of which is here, and the turbo itself is over here. All hot side components have been ceramic coated, so that is the manifold, the downpipe, and the hot side of the turbo. Their turbo kit also includes a mating piece to be welded onto the exhaust, so this will go with the V-band. We have a replacement catalytic converter that will also be welding in because the customer believes that his is bad. I think so. And then over here we have my coolant upgrade to 6A end lines for the turbo kit. That's here. We have the Deatschwerks 300C fuel pump. We have Deatschwerks 800cc injectors, and we are installing my fuel return conversion kit so that this system is deadhead from the factory. We're converting it over to fuel return along with a regulator, and that will of course be boost referenced. So next we have, sitting here on the table, a Motion Raceworks catch can. I'm not a dealer for these, but I gotta say these are fantastic. We installed one on another customer's car recently. Since we're gonna be converting this to purely VTA on the catch can side. VTA meaning vent to atmosphere. That means both the block breather and the valve cover are gonna be connected to this so it can breathe free all the time. Next here on the table we have our Autometer gauge cup, and we have an Innovate Motorsports SCG-1 boost controller failsafe unit. I'm really fond of these because it allows you to have that fail-safe. It reacts faster than you can to save your motor from running too lean or anything like that. Next right here we have the Rotarytronics gauge unit. There's not really much to show here. It's just a little circuit board that I'm going to solder on. This replaces the fake oil pressure gauge on your dash, on your gauge cluster, with a little screen that shows you OBD coolant temperature, and it gives you a Bosch PSTF1 sensor. I believe it's PSTF1. It is a pressure and temperature sensor for oil, so you have live data for that at all times as well. Next we have everything required to do a timing service, along with Mazdaspeed valve springs and Esslinger Stg2 cams, because we're going to be doing a cam upgrade as well. We have our ITV24 spark plugs. Customers complained about their coil wires starting to sputter, so we're going to replace all of those while we're in there. Next down here, the customer has also supplied us with a Moroso power steering tank, a bunch of new fog lights. So we have new OEM fog lights, and then down here we have new OEM headlights. So we're replacing those since the bumper already comes off. We have my battery relocation kit, as well as my big fan upgrade kit for the radiator. And I believe that's about it. Of course, down here we have the intercooler, but that's part of the turbo kit. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start taking this thing apart. I'm going to do as much as I can on video. Some of the stuff is not really worth doing on video, like anything I have to do under the car. Excuse me. So, let's get to it. Alright, I've gotten everything in a position where I'm ready to start working. We have just the timing components over here, along with, I've emptied out my table otherwise. And everything else that I'd shown is all sitting in the back now on top of the table over there. I got the car up on jack stands. So I realized that I didn't mention we did upgrade the clutch recently, a couple of months ago when we were preparing for all this, because the customer said, look, if I can't find a clutch that I like driving on, then it's not worth doing all the work. And I understand the sentiment. So we ended up putting a uni clutch into this after all the research, and having recently installed a uni clutch onto a Subaru, and the pedal feels amazing, the engagement's great, so it's nothing aggressive. It actually feels softer than stock, a little bitey of aggression in the actual grab point, but customer's really happy with that. So the clutch is already spoken for and taken care of, and now we're ready to go ahead and start in with the disassembly. So because there's a lot of overlapping work here, I'm going to go ahead and do a whole lot of tearing apart, a little bit in excess for doing the timing, but all because we're doing all this overlapping work. So I'm going to do a whole bunch of disassembly, and then we're going to dive in on the timing. So let's get to it. Alright, we just witnessed a Christmas miracle. This is one of the bolts in the tensioner. You can see it's a little crooked, and that's because I went to loosen it and it went lefty-tighty, and then I was like, okay, maybe we push it back in. Didn't want to go back in, didn't want to come out, so I doused it in this product we use called Torque CB. It's like PB Blaster, but way better. We used to use PB Blaster, then we found Torque Deep Creep worked better, then we found that this stuff works even better. And I sprayed it on there, I don't know, five minutes ago, and it came out. So I don't have to do block tapping activity, I just have to replace this bolt now. I'm happy. So I believe this is one of the first 2.5 swaps I ever did. And I did use the 2.0 pulley, so we're going to put a 2.5 pulley on here because of course they have the holes to make them lighter weight. And I've got a bunch of those on shelf. So let's go grab one. Alright, that's more like it. So I'm going to put that off to my pile of parts and then we'll get back to this. Alright, I've gotten to a point where I'm going to take a break. No, actually it's 4. I think I'm going to go ahead and be done for today. So, I've gotten the timing stuff on the front taken apart, got the top of the engine opened up, got a whole lot of room here for a lot of other activities going on. The header's out as well. So I'll continue with disassembly of the timing. I think I'm just going to go ahead move forward with just completing all the timing stuff now. I think we're at a good spot. I mean, I've got plenty of access now, and I've got a lot of other stuff out of the way that usually isn't out of the way for when I do the timing service. So we're gonna knock that out first thing tomorrow. I have already assembled all of the valve springs with the keepers and stuff. It's just what I do. I always have extra sets of the keepers and the retainers, so that way when I just take these out, I don't have to transfer them over. It's just throw them aside, get the next ones in. So if you see me doing that, it's because I already have them assembled, but this is all it is. So I already have the keepers in there, ready to go. We'll be installing using the tool from Company 23. I have 2 studs on mine and 2 cages to go with it. Makes my life easier. We sell these on our website. It comes with 1 stud, 1 cage, as per usual. But since I'm a vendor for these, I have double. Just makes my life easier since I do so many of these. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get to taking those cams out, and we're going to start changing valve springs. Let's get to it. Alright, that actually went super smoothly. I got all the valve springs in really quick. I think that took me, what, 25 minutes? Cool. Didn't drop anything. It went smooth. It's real smooth. So I already got my caps on here. We're going to go ahead and write down all the bucket sizes. We're going to throw the buckets on, throw the cams on, spin them over. I would like to point out what I did there is, you may have noticed, we did cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I stuck the reach down tester back into cylinder 3 to make sure that cylinders 1 and 4 at TDC. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach down in here with a pry bar and rotate the crank back just a little bit so we can get that clearance so we can spin the cams over without interference. Actually, let me do that before I forget. Alright, we got our first round of numbers. I've got all of our bucket sizes, I've got all of our measurements. Seth helped me out. So I'm going to go plug this in the calculator and see what values we need. Okay, I had to actually go back and check my math. It looks like I accidentally grabbed a 182 instead of a 282, and we ended up with a really big value. Scared me. So we just went back and checked it. That's it. So now we're going to get back to doing the timing, because now all the values should be good. Alright, we're getting ready to reassemble the timing here. So went through, cleaned up the front cover, knocked out the front main, we're going to replace that. Cleaned all this stuff up, looks nice, pressure washed it, hit it with the brake clean. You already saw I cleaned up the front end of the motor, that's ready to go. I got my assistant Seth over here, he's cleaning up all the timing components, removing as much oil as possible so we go back together without having oil all over the place. And then I think that's about it. Just going to go through the normal timing stuff, get it all back together. Okay, we've finished up the timing. I've installed the spark plugs, I've installed the coil packs. We already have the crank torqued on. We don't have all the front cover bolts torqued yet because those are still drying, so we're not going to do any reassembly on the front side. That's why I went to the top side for reassembly. So I think at this point we're going to go ahead and take care of doing all the coil wiring. We're going to rewire all those. We're going to do the fuel rail and the fuel system upgrade stuff. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and do these coil connectors, so this is the fun part. Alright, that's all the time we have for today. Tomorrow we're going to take care of wrapping up all of these wires now that we've finished replacing out all the pigtails. And then we can move on to the next step, which would be the fuel system and the battery relocation. As you saw, I just wrapped up the wires on top. I zip tied everything up to make it look nice. I installed part of my fuel system here. We've got the injectors and the rail installed along with the regulator, and it's hooked back into the stock fuel line, which will be transforming into a return in the back. So at this time, I'm actually just gonna skip over this part. I'm gonna be under the car taking care of doing the battery relocation and the fuel lines. So a lot of stuff that I can't really show. Also, I'll take care of doing my fan system, so we'll resume right after I do all that. We've taken care of getting the battery relocated, and we've taken care of installing the fan system. So here's my fan system, and over here we have the relay and the fuse. Then we have the battery relocated. Obviously, the wires are nowhere to be seen. This is all you're going to see from here, and it's mounted up in the trunk. After we're finished with how we're going to modify the trunk, we'll show that on video. Okay, so I wanted to give a little detail. Whenever I do any of these power steering pump removals or any AC stuff removals, I'm always replacing out all the O-rings. So when I did the condenser down here, I replaced all the O-rings on that. The power steering, very common problem is that little O-ring there, so I just replaced that guy out. I just have my bin full of assorted O-rings over here that I just dig through and find the right one. So that's just something I try to do to make sure that this thing has the best chance of longevity and having a good AC, as well as the power steering. So, tank is mounted. Another point of detail here is I had to have Seth grind off just the front end of the Moroso tank because it's very square on the bottom and it contacted the fan of my new fan system. So as I've mentioned in my instructions previously, these are a tight fit. So we just grind down a little bit off of the front of that. No structural integrity loss, just it's just the interference. So a little bit of the front's been cut off. Now it fits tight. Won't make any noise though. Okay, now we're going to worry about getting this coolant tank mounted in the center. Alright, we get to the weird part where we have to put the turbo in and clock it. So I went ahead and just said we'll go ahead and take care of doing a couple of the intercooler pipings. We'll get the intercooler mounted, figure out how much we need to cut over here, and then in a little bit we're going to tilt the motor, drop the assembly in. A couple of details here. So the way it comes is it comes with one fitting here and one fitting there. I swapped the positions just because in my experience it's been better to have this port on the bottom for access to the wastegate arm, so that way we don't have the coolant hose interfering. Also, these are my 6AN ports. You'll notice they're significantly larger than the 4AN ones that come with the Fab 9 kit. We've put on the drain. I've got all these pieces kind of loose so I can clock it on car. And then we also need to figure out the actuator setup, because the actuator is bolted on this to the CHRA. And my last install was with a Garry, nothing like this. All right, so we're gonna move on with doing a couple of these things. Bit of a bummer that the Fab 9 silicone hoses don't come cut to the length we need them, so we tried to put the one on the throttle body, and it won't fit. It smashes into the fuse box, so I sent Seth off to cut that. Next bummer I'm putting on this OEM MAF sensor onto the MAF tube, and it's not lining up. These holes are just a little bit off and just enough. So I'm gonna have to open up the holes on this MAF sensor so I can actually bolt it on. Alright, check it out. I just installed the Motion Raceworks catch can. It's mounted over there on the left side, passenger side. Got it secured to the firewall here, and then I drilled a hole in the top and under, and I have a 3/8 line running down to the wheel well, so whenever this customer goes to do their oil changes, they just flip this little ball valve down here, and it'll drain the catch can under the car at the little, where the hose is coming out below. Pretty nifty setup. We did this on a couple of other cars. Okay, so as you see, we got this side of the intercooler piping set up. This side we're ready. It's just I went ahead and turned Seth loose on doing all the headlight stuff. So after he's done with the headlight stuff, we're going to resume with the turbo stuff. I'm getting ahead of myself this morning. I forgot to hit record. All right, let's show you what I did. So I dropped the turbo in. Yesterday I had tried to drop it in, and then I realized, oh yeah, we have to tilt the motor in order to drop it in. So I got the jack under here. I took the nut off the motor mount and I dropped it in. So I left all of the stuff loose so I could orient it. The primary objective of dropping it in right now is to make sure that the V-band from the manifold to the turbine housing is correct orientation. So let's go and look. So you see, we want to make sure that turbine housing is pointing in a good direction where I can get the downpipe on there. So I have just now tightened down this nut over here for that V-band, but this right here is still able to be moved. So you can see I can grab this and I can twist it. So the next thing is we go down on the underside and let's take a look. All right, so we're looking at the underside here. And as you can see, the drain position is very close to the motor mount. So we do have the option of rotating the CHRA separate from the turbine housing. I think the position it's in right now is probably fine. We want it pointing as downward as possible. I might rotate it a couple of degrees because it's pointing like straight at the motor mount. I might rotate it a couple of degrees away. But we're going to drill out that hole right there, that threaded hole right there next to the motor mount, and we're going to use that as our drain position. The kit comes with a fitting that you're supposed to drill out the oil pan. I have had bad results with the oil pan just because the oil pan is very thin, and that boss right there is very, very thick. That'll give us a lot of material to seal with. All right, so we have to remove this guy now, and we're going to have to attach on the cooling lines, as well as the figure out the wastegate orientation stuff. All right, so let's get. All right, we're close up here with the turbo. So I rotated the center section over just a little bit, and then the front is still loose. We can still move that around after it's in the car, but I wanted to get everything else lined up so I could get the wastegate actuator installed. So now, you see I got all the lines on here as well. We have the oil feed line, and then the two coolant lines, and then you'll see this other stuff on here. This is a product by DEI, it's Design Engineering Incorporated. That's the company we get the transmission tunnel heat shielding from. It's just this really fancy heat shield that is it's fireproof. So on my personal car, I actually had to run the one of the coolant lines through the manifold between two of the runners. Zero problems. The stuff is invincible. So running that on both sides as well as on the oil line, so we have maximum heat protection. We don't have any of the heat from the hot side affecting any of these or deteriorating them. So this is solid now, this is solid, this is still loose. The actuator's installed. I went ahead and pressure tested it. I have a vacuum actuator, so it starts to get loose closer to 10 psi. The positioning of this, I had to actually thread it down a little bit because this should be a 7 psi actuator, but the fact is I couldn't get very many threads on here, and that doesn't make me feel good to just have 1 or 2 threads on here, so I wanted to get a couple of more. So we are a little bit preloaded. That's fine. This will be set up to run something like 10 to 12 psi as it is, so it shouldn't be an issue. So I think we're just about ready to drop this in. So the Fab 9 setup has you do some goofy stuff with this plugging into the stock position for the oil pressure switch, and then you run it over to here, and then this is the one that's supposed to go to your oil feed on the turbo, and then more goofy stuff, and then you're supposed to put your stock sensor here, or in our case the PSTF1, which I think this is goofy. I'm going to see if I can get around doing this by doing maybe something else. Like modifying the perch or something. It'd be a lot nicer than this. If not, I'm sure that'll work. Let's see, so normally I run the oil line around the back of the motor over the transmission tunnel. It's got a 90 on it, so that makes life easy. And then the coolant line, we'll just run it up and over to the front, sort of like this way. And then the other line just goes straight up because it's right next to the heater lines, and we'll tee into the heater lines there. Alright, so I didn't like that whole idea of running all of this stuff in order just to run the sensor and the oil output, so I have a bunch of spare perches, and I went ahead and said, you know what, worst case that I just throw another one away. No big deal, right? I have a couple, like probably a dozen extras of these. Check it out. Took a perch, drilled a hole in the top, and then I went ahead and threaded this in, so now we have an oil feed coming out of the top. We still have our sensor in the back, stock perch, and no other BS required. Modified the fuel system, thought I'd go ahead and take care of this. So this is pretty simple. This is how my kit comes. We have 2 fuel hoses in here. What we do is we cut off the stock plastic one that runs from this to the pump, and then we drill out that other spot with 9/16, put in our bulkhead connector, fuel hose it connected, right? And then we have a second fuel hose that comes now off of that bar. We will use that as the return, and that just goes down into here. It hangs loosely, and it's cut at the end to make sure that it doesn't, you know, form some sort of seal or anything. We won't have any back pressure. That's the idea here. All right, customer had a DW65. They had mentioned they had a fuel pump upgrade. DW65 is not exactly an upgrade. It's pretty much OEM. So we put in a 300. So now this thing ought to push plenty of fuel. So we're ready to drop this guy in. Once this is dropped in, then we can start running the AN lines down, or the one AN line, down and back, and then forward, and then connect it to the fuel rail, and the fuel system's done. That's pretty much it. Before I pulled this out, I took the opportunity to clean off the whole back deck area and make sure no crap fell into the fuel tank. And after I pulled this out, I also cleaned this off even more because there's more jammed around the edges. So I'm not going to show any of this part. It's just pretty standard. Remove the fuel pump, put the fuel pump in. Nothing really to see here. So I'm going to knock this out. Trucking right along this morning, I've got the intake manifold pulled back. As you see, the pry bar sticking out of it. I have managed to put in the 5/8 evap line, which is this guy, for our PCB. I went ahead and cut the other one. That's for this guy. I'm not going to hook it up until we have the turbo installed, though, because that's just going to get in the way. Now, because I have this open, new intake manifold gasket. The other one's in there for a long time. We got boost running through here. I want best chances, so I got this guy. Now, I did manage to get a clamp on that hose that goes onto the PCB. That's good. I also got a cap, 5/8 cap that's on the back side of the intake manifold. Nothing to show here because it's all way deep in there. I had to do it while pulling back with the pry bar and fishing the stuff down in there. Let's see, I've went ahead and mounted the MAC valve over here. And then I have over there the map sensor for the boost controller. And then I've got all the other stuff over here. We're gonna go ahead and do the gauge cluster. I was getting this ready while I was waiting on this gasket to come in. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop this gasket in, reattach the intake manifold gasket, and then we'll continue on with the cluster stuff. So I finished drilling out the turbo drain in the block, and what I ended up using is one of the longer bits, as well as this old school drill, because the access was really tight down there. So the old school drill doesn't have a battery on the bottom, so it allowed me to fit it into here and drill it out. So as you see, hole's drilled. Now we just need to tap it for 3/8 NPT and we can put our fitting in. We have drilled and tapped the drain. It's right there. And I went ahead and put the motor mount back on. Okay, the turbo's been clocked appropriately. I had to move it over just a little bit from where it was. The cold side moved a little towards the passenger side, so the hot side can move a little more inward. And that gives a little more room on the CHRA. Okay, so I went ahead and threw in the exhaust gasket. I've tightened down all the exhaust nuts. We were missing one, so I put an extra one in there. I've got this guy here, so I'm going to run these hoses. I'm going to go ahead and tee off over there, run another hose over to here, tee it here, that way I can run to the blow-off and to the wastegate. I went ahead and threw a clamp and a cap onto this. I don't have a plug that's this size because this is not an NPT. This is like a straight cut fine thread. Nothing that I would have on shelf. But all this stuff is set how it's going to be. I've put on the catch can lines now so we can see how everything's going to lay out. This guy goes ahead and it's going to be plugged in over here. I'm going to go ahead and cut my line here so I can connect this. Look at that, it lines up just about right. The turbo drain, we'll show that in a little bit after we get down there. I have not put on the motor mount nut yet, just because I've been lifting it up and down a little bit to get some better access here. And then over here, we have the downpipe, which I went ahead and figured out. I'll put the OE here and the aftermarket here. A fun note I noticed, so the Innovate Motorsports kit, it comes with these little clamps. They're not even the right size for the hose that's supplied. They're too loose. So I'll get to supply my own here, which is fine. Just kind of a goofy note. It's like, yeah, you included them, but didn't really help much. Okay, we got a lot of stuff installed now. We got the belt, the tensioner, the alternator. It is important to note that I had to install the wires before I installed the coupler on the turbo, so I ended up having to take the coupler back off to plug in the alternator and get the lower bolt in. This guy, I can't get this to go down anymore because the angle is only so much. It's supposed to be 45 degrees, and that's pretty much 45 degrees right there. This pipe can't move any closer because, well, it's constrained here. I gotta figure something out here. I may end up making another one of these. We've hooked up the coolant line here. The other coolant line comes up and around here. It's connected right there. Got my catch can lines hooked up. Still need to make my shield to go around the turbo manifold. Let's take a look up front. So I've got my big, beautiful air filter on there. That one doesn't look like the one that comes in the kit because the one that comes in the kit is laughable in size. Look at that little thing. It's a toy. I think the noses are the same size, but then the body of this is huge. So this is not going to be the loss point. Whereas this thing, I would say, arguably, this is probably not the, it's probably the restriction. So let's take a look on the underside. All right, so crawling under here, you'll see how close it is with that alternator and the turbo inlet. But I got that guy hooked up, so I'm satisfied with that. We have the turbo drain hooked up. I had to cut maybe an inch off of the supplied line, but it fits nicely. I wish it wasn't so close to that motor mount, but there's not really much we can do there. Initially, I'd taken the downpipe and I presumed that I'd be able to fit the OEM sensor on the front side and the other sensor on the back side, but as you see, the OEM sensor is now on the rear, and that's because the other sensor, the wideband sensor, it points, it's really long. It would have required me to bang way more out of this firewall, so I did still have to hammer it to get the clearance I do now. But everything's kind of in the best position I can get it. You'll see my oil line runs over, and then it comes over to here. So next I'll be taking care of the oil perch, swapping it out for that one. We can get kind of a peek on the side here of how everything is assembled here as well. I forgot to mention that the front crash sensor, I move it to here. Normally it sits right there. And it's not this air filter's fault. All the air filters that go right here get in the way. But instead of plugging it there, it's securely mounted here. So perfectly fine. So what I've decided to do here is, since we have a coupling problem here, this is as far as I can get the coupler to go forward. This is as far back as that pipe goes. I'm going to go ahead and just cut the pipe here, and then just bead roll these ends, or bead roll this end. I have a spare one of this pipe on hand, and then I'll just make this reach here. Since for some reason the kit came with an extra coupler, maybe they knew I'd be doing this. So we'll just have twin couplers here. Then if anyone needs to service anything, I guess it'll be bumper can stay on. All right, this is the biggest segment I had on hand that was already powder coated, so I chopped it down to this. I bead rolled both of these ends. I chopped off a little bit off of the other piece. I pretty much chopped it off right at the weld. We'll just butt these up, stick them in. Let's go. And there you have it. The extra joints in there. All right, it's back to looking actually like a car again. I've reassembled the front bumper, the hood, put the wheels back on it. Let's take a closer look. I'm currently waiting on the smaller fittings to come in for this. They should be in tomorrow. Went ahead and cut my lines to fit. We are waiting on the map sensor to come in. That's supposed to come in today. I've filled the power steering. I've filled the oil. I've even circulated the oil. As you can see, I disconnected the injectors so I could circulate the motor. And I added, let's see, another T over here. I will be adding another T just to put on that map sensor as well. And then I'm also, a while back I made this little template for a heat shield for the EFR turbo kits. And this fits pretty nicely. I just finished deburring this. And then I'm about to cut this shielding and put it on top of that as well for maximum protection. Okay, so normally when you do a heat shield, you put the shielding on one side. But when I do these, I have this fancy black version of the DEI shielding. So I actually put it on both sides for maximum protection. So this will go on the side facing the turbo. This will go on the other way. This will go on the side facing the turbo. This will go on the side away from the turbo. So we just get maximum protection. And we have a thermal camera image of a car I did a while back when I first did this template. And it was like they were having, after a run, they had 800 degrees-ish on the surface of the manifold. And then they had over 400 degrees on the surface of that first charge pipe, the one that runs up right next to the manifold. And what we were able to get is, came back and did the test again. We got the manifold showing about 850, and then the charge pipe showing 100. It was like 103 or something, but still, massive difference. So the temperature went up on the manifold, and the temperature went down on the charge pipe. So really, really good protection from getting that heat into the charge pipe. Makes the intercooler work less hard. All right, so now I'm gonna assemble this guy. So my wife has hopped in and she wanted to help me out with this, so she's doing that. I'm gonna go ahead and start in on this mid pipe. So we're kind of done on the car until I can get some more stuff in. So the catalyst needs to be replaced. We're gonna go ahead and cut it right behind the weld here. And then the front segment, I don't know if I'll be able to use any of it just because, well, I mean, this is the wrong flange and I want to go 3-inch here. So what we'll be doing is we got the customer supplied catalyst. It's identical to the one that's on here, so I'll be able to weld that one on here. I'll cut this back until the 3-inch diameter position. We'll put a 3-inch forward and then match it to the V-band when it's on the car. Meanwhile, I'll go ahead and just take care of cutting this for now. The customer was not wrong. The catalyst is loose in here. Let's see. I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, it's loose in there, so good thing we're replacing it. So this is effectively scrap. Can't really use this. I don't know, I may cut the catalyst and then use this for something else. Finished product, check that out. Real thick, lots of insulation. So the only thing that it mounts to is gonna be the one hole that's at the front where the ground is. Everything else is so tight fitting, this won't move at all. So now I gotta go. Okay, we've now installed the heat shield. Like I said, it's a really tight fit and it just secures right there on that bolt. So real tight up in there. And it'll protect everything on this side from all the heat on that side. Okay, so I've moved over near the welding area, waiting on this car to be finished so it can come off the lift and I can get on here and weld. Meanwhile, the car's still staying over there on the other side. As you may not be able to see on the other side of Tony's box. I left the mid pipe outside. I cleaned it off. It looks like he had some sort of diff seal leak at some point, so it had some oil on it. Hey, no problem, I'll clean that off. But since I cut the mid pipe exactly behind the other catalyst, that's where the next O2 sensor is. I can't get that O2 sensor off, so I left the pipe outside and just doused it in a product called Torque CB. If you haven't heard of it before, this stuff's even better than PB Blaster. It's by Kimball Midwest. It's one of our suppliers. And it's also really good at cleaning oil off of like baked-in stains off of your exhaust. So I also use it to get the grease that was baked onto the mid pipe. Now, as I mentioned, I was going to cut the catalyst. So this is the catalyst. It's 2.5 on one side. This will go towards the rear of the car. And then I cut this. So what it is, I took a 3-inch pipe and I stuck it over, and then I made a line around it and I cut it to match. So this will match my 3-inch. So we'll go off of the turbo to the down pipe. We'll have the V-band into 3-inch into this, and then this will go on to the mid pipe. But again, we're gonna match weld all of that stuff. So for the meantime, I've got that soaking outside in the Torque CB, and hopefully it'll free up because the O2 sensor is probably already damaged. And if they ever need to replace it, well, it's stuck. And if it's not damaged now, it's gonna be damaged after I weld right next to it, because it's only about, I'd say about 2 inches away from where the weld joint's gonna be. So I'm just gonna sit here and just practice some welding in the meantime. All right, move the car over to the lift. Let's take a look at what we're gonna be welding. So we got under here, the mating V-band is already on here, so we'll be welding a 3-inch off of this. The catalyst will go right here, and then we'll weld it to this. Now, the customer has an incorrect clamp right here. This is a butt joint connector. I don't know where this came from, but I undid it, and it's still a slip joint under it. So the slip joint was frozen. I sprayed it down with that lubricant stuff so I could rotate this, because for some reason this was rotated very downward and we wanted a little more upward. Now I'm waiting on the flex joint to come in. I forgot that we were going to do a flex joint on this, so we'll put a flex joint right here. That'll make our life a little bit easier for the rest of the fabrication, as well as it'll impart less of the vibrations of the engine into the exhaust, as well as the exhaust won't be you know, supported under the turbo. That's also not what we want. Went ahead and threw some P-clips in here to hold up the wiring. I always do this on all these cars just so the wiring doesn't get caught up in anything. So as I had shown earlier, we have the other side of the turbo already cut down, so this gives us a little bit of flexibility here, because then it can slide over just a little bit and we'll be able to get a little bit of a movement here for however we want to land it. So once that flex joint pipe comes in, then we'll weld that guy onto here, and then we'll figure out what length of segment we need to connect that 3-inch to this guy. Yesterday I went ahead and welded up the exhaust. So if you know from my other videos or from my history, I am not a welder, but I have been working on it as much as I can in my free time to try and get better at it. So my progress can even be seen on these welds, because I did okay here, better here, Not so great here. There was a gap I had to fill on this one, and then I did so-so on this one. But all this is back perch, TIG welded, 304 or 316 stainless. We have our flex joint on there, and we're ready to install. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this on today. That should be it for the underside. Aside from I am waiting for the O2 sensor extension to come in still. Hopefully that comes in today. The map sensor's come in, we've installed that, it's up top. I'm starting to not like how much spaghetti I got going on up top. I'm gonna ask the customer if I can put on like a vacuum block. That would look a lot nicer. So let's get this exhaust installed, and then we can take it off the lift. Let's check out the exhaust work real quick. So there's our V-band. I welded that, all of that. Got the O2 sensor wiring all cleaned up and out of the way. And I'll connect it all the way back. Now, I'm waiting on that O2 sensor extension for this guy, so I can route that along the right side, get that out of harm's way here. We got the correct fittings for the boost control solenoid. They're on here. I'm gonna have to put some clamps on there. Still waiting on that upstream O2 sensor extension, and then we'll be ready to fire it up. All right, we got the tune loaded. We've got the O2 sensor extension installed, and we've got it over here with the front end way up in the air. I'm gonna go ahead and bleed in the coolant. So we've got the snap-on coolant bleeder on here, got my fan up under here, and I've got 4 gallons of coolant down here. So let's go ahead and demonstrate how this works. It's gonna get noisy. So first we're gonna open up the vacuum valve. We have both valves shut right now. We're gonna open the vacuum valve. We're gonna let this run down. Hopefully it gets down to about 25 or so. All right, it looks like we leveled off at about 23.5-ish. I'm gonna go ahead and shut this. So now we can let this sit for a moment and see if it starts dipping down. If it keeps on going down, then that means we have a leak somewhere. If it dips down just a little bit, it could just be the hose is adjusting or something like that. All right, it's not moving, so I'm gonna go ahead and start filling. So we have the vacuum pulled. We're just gonna open the other valve. We've already bled up the line here, so I have coolant all the way through the line here. We're gonna go ahead and open this up. And it's gonna start drinking. Okay, it appears it's finished. We're gonna go ahead and shut this valve. We're gonna disconnect our air. I'm gonna open both valves back up. And what that'll do is that'll allow this to just bleed off any additional pressure and empty out our line here. I'm going to take this funnel and I'm going to stick it on top. Make sure the valve is open. So as of right now, the coolant level is right up to the neck of this. I'm going to go a step further and I'm going to lift up the nose, the back of the coolant reservoir so we don't get air. We're going to go and turn the fan on high. Right now I still have the under tray off, so we're just going to have this thing blasting. And then we're going to go ahead and start it up. While we're waiting, I'm also going to run the AC vacuum and fill procedure. Now that we've let it idle for a little bit and the coolant level's gone up a little bit, this indicates that we have an air bubble in the system, which is why we're doing the whole burp process. So now we're just going to hold it at about 2,500 to 3,500 RPM and then just see what happens over here. The purpose for the fan is to try and keep the temperature as low as possible in the system. We only want to keep the thermostat open. We don't want to keep it at a high temperature because we're not trying to boil over the funnel here. We're just trying to get those air bubbles enough motivation to get out. So by revving it up, we're moving the air through the system a little bit faster, giving it more motivation to get trapped up here in the tank. Once it gets trapped in the tank, obviously it just comes up here, the level goes down. So at some points you'll see some bubbles. Okay, I'm going to let this thing idle for a little bit, cool back down, and then we'll shut it off, let it cool all the way down, see if it burps after it cools down. That should be it, hopefully. All right, so we've got everything back together. Got the AC charged. I'm just gonna check the levels. You can hear the fan runs. It's healthy. The system seemed to burp pretty well. I had to pull just a little bit of coolant out of the tank to get it down to the sight glass. After a couple of test drives, if it burps anymore, we'll be able to see that, because right now in the sight glass, it's just about towards the top. So let's get this thing, I need to reinstall the under tray, and then we'll be able to take this thing out for a test drive. All right, so we just got back from a test drive a little bit ago. Thing drives phenomenally. We made between 9 and 12 PSI on each of the pulls, wide open throttle. Very, very, very good pulls. So the tuner gave me a call just a little bit ago, and he said, hey man, you got some wide open throttle on here, but you only have about 1 PSI, like what's going on? And I was like, 1 PSI, but the boost gauge is telling me a lot more. And the car definitely doesn't feel like it's got 1 PSI when you floor it. So we've had an issue before with these cheap map sensors that have been included in these kits before. Maybe that's why they don't include them anymore, but I went to go look at the map sensor to see what's going on. Because we're reading vacuum, we're reading ambient, but we're not reading boost. Check this out, nifty party trick. Just comes right apart. So I guess now I have to replace this. You're not hitting the EFR cut, there's no way. Cool. So I'm here with Mr. Garry. He's here to pick up his car, and I'm going to take him for a drive before I let him drive it, so you can see what it can do.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. All right, ready?
Yeah, hit it. Yeah.
All right, so we hit 10.
Heard a little bit of a tire brake right there when you hit it.
Yeah, it must have spiked. It hit 15. That chirp must have been when it hit the 15.
That's a good boost.
Yeah.
Any RPM range you suggest keeping in it when you get into the boost as far as going?
Take it to red line every time.
Okay, that's where I'm going.
First impressions?
Love it, love it. It's definitely, it's just a very smooth pull. Seems to be a friendly car to drive, which is, you know, when we first started talking, what I wanted. I didn't want a car that just was balls out and just not fun to drive. Seems like it's got a lot of characteristics of before, but a nice pull.